Hey, I just want to jump in real quick and let you know about our free private Facebook group that I've just started for all our podcast listeners. Now, this is a great place for all ambitious Christians where we can talk about all the latest strategies and tips and advice we've learned from everything from inside to outside of this podcast, everything there is to do about achieving your God dream. I'll leave a link in the show notes down below where you can check it out and join for free. Also, if you're enjoying the Son of Man podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review. This will help me on my journey to empower more ambitious Christians from all over the world, just like yourself. But anyway, let's get on with the show. Hey, I'm Paul and welcome to the Son of Man podcast. This is a podcast for ambitious Christians who are working towards their God dreams. For me, God has put it on my heart to end homelessness in New Zealand. So join me on this journey as I talk with experts about how we can learn more about God, dive deeper into our finances, have better relationships, work smarter, set better goals, and live healthier lives so we can achieve our God dreams. If this is something you're interested in, make sure you follow this podcast on whatever platform you're currently listening to this on. And without further ado, let's get right into this week's episode. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 30 of the Son of Man podcast, and I've got a crazy episode lined up for you today. It's with a guy called Tyler Moon, who is someone running a 10-mile race over in Minnesota, and basically what happens is he has cardiac arrest, goes into a coma, concussion, the whole shebang, and it's a crazy story about how God shows up in his life, what God's doing in his life, and usually what we do on this podcast is talk to people who aim to help people who are ambitious Christians, right? So people who to how to read the Bible more productively, how to set better goals, how to sort your personal finances, and I believe this is going to fill you with faith. So if you guys are ready for this episode, I'm not going to draw this out any longer than it needs to be. Without further ado, here is episode 30 of the Son of Man podcast with Tyler Moon. Tyler Moon, welcome to the Son of Man podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Paul. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm so good. First of all, thank you so much for jumping on today. We're going to be talking about your story, what God's done in your life, and some crazy facts that's happened. And I'm super interested to just jump right in. So before we get started, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your growing up? You start wherever you want, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so like I said, my name is Tyler Moon. I live in Minnesota, which is in the United States of America. We border with Canada, so it can be cold here sometimes, but in the spring and summer, it's pretty pleasant here. But yeah, I grew up in this area, pretty active kid, played lots of sports, basketball, baseball, a little bit of track and field. My main sport was actually football, so American football. I was an offensive lineman for my college days, so I was a bit bigger when I was in college. But I love sports, love watching sports and being involved in that area.
What college did you go to?
I went to a small school called Luther College, so it's a kind of a tiny school in Iowa, United States, and studied business while I was there, as well as communications and Spanish. So had a great experience there, loved the community that was there, and loved playing football. It was an awesome experience.
Right. I've actually never talked to someone who's played they haven't mentioned it at least, played like a college sport. Just from the outside perspective, probably about a quarter of the people listening are from the States, but for the other 75%, what's the experience like as a college athlete? Like, because obviously all we see is shows, maybe not shows, but we've seen the movies, we've seen all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But from your perspective, maybe I assume it's probably a little bit different in a smaller school, but like, what was your experience of playing football in college?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the U.S., they have different divisions of college sports. So Division I is kind of like what you see probably on TV, University of Alabama or University of Texas, those schools. And then you go down Division II, Division III, and there's also some divisions as well. So I was Division III, which means that there's no athletic scholarships. You basically just play because you want to play. It's still competitive, but it's a group of people that aren't D1 or D2. But it's a lot of work and a lot of fun all at the same time. So even though we were Division III, we're still getting up multiple days a week early in the morning to work out. We still have to pass all of our classes to stay eligible.
True.
And then we have games, every week in the fall. And then it kind of just always continues. 4 years straight, you're either working out or running or playing a game and being involved with recruiting other players to come on the team. So it's an awesome experience. It's a great experience, especially as a young adult, because you get to learn a lot about yourself and a lot about the skills that you want to have as you get older.
Right, and it's crazy because I went to university here in New Zealand. Like, it's not that big of a thing, like sports. Like, obviously they're there, It might be, I don't know if it's probably like, it'll be less than what you had. Like there's like, you don't even like, if you didn't go to university, like you wouldn't even know about it. Like people just like they play and it's competitive and all that. But like, there's no travel, there's no nothing. I don't even know how it works, but there's no like big college sports here, which is kind of disappointing because I wish there were. That'd be really cool. And I'd go to the games if there were some, but it's just not really a thing here. High school's like kind of big, but when you get to college, it kind of just fizzles out and no one really, there's no big, well, obviously if big professional sports here is probably rugby, but I'm not much of a rugby person. But with basketball and all that, it's just not that big, which is disappointing. But I wish it was. Do you know much about rugby? We're getting off topic, but I'm just curious.
No. I was gonna actually ask you about like football because I know there's Australian rules football.
Right.
But I didn't know if New Zealand had some type of football or like if it's just rugby.
Yes.
What's that like?
Yeah, we've just got rugby, which is like Australia used to be good at it, but then they kind of just don't care about it anymore. And when I went to Australia, they're big on AFL, so like Aussie rules football, like they're big on it. I actually don't really understand it, to be honest. We did it for a bit in PE class, but I don't really. It's confusing. It was cool, but it's not. I don't know. I just never got into it. But yeah, we just play rugby. I don't really. I did when I was 5, and I was a skinny white kid, so I didn't really work out too well. But but yeah, so it's good. So but rugby's like dying off a little bit, to be honest. Like it's not that big anymore. But
yeah, like with injuries and stuff. Is that why?
I think they haven't done a good job of like promoting it that well. Like the big like professional level, like there's not that much. You know how there's the whole production value behind sports in America. We don't really.
Right.
The games are televised, but there's no. I was listening to someone talk about it, and you know how if you watch NBA or NFL, there's like storylines in the background about players, what they do off the field, and there's like rivalries and teams, and there's like obviously it's sport, but there's also like story and characters in it. Whereas in New Zealand, it's not really that. It's kind of just sport, and then over time, it's kind of just starting to fizzle out a little. I think that's my opinion. People might disagree, but that's how I see it. But without further ado, why don't we talk about your story? So you started running at some point, and I'll let you start wherever you want to start, and just get right into it.
Yeah. So after I got out of college, I was a bit bigger. So I played offensive line, which is kind of a position you need to be a bit like heavier and stronger. And as I was getting into my like adult years, I knew I didn't really want to be that big. And so I decided to try to just get into better shape. So I started running, seriously or more consistently when I was like 22 or 23. Right. And I would just go for runs a couple days a week. And slowly just started to kind of lose some weight. And I really just started running because of that. I wanted to get into shape. I didn't have a super strong passion for it, I would say. Running for fun was not something I really had thought about. But over time, I kind of did enjoy it. And by the time I was 25 and I signed up for kind of my first official race, I was excited for it. I was excited to kind of compete again in a different way, not like in a football way, but in kind of a, against yourself type of way. So that's kind of my journey to where I was when I got to be about 25.
And did you say 2015, or am I just thinking of 25?
25. So 2019 is when I ran my race.
2019. Okay. How long was the race? Not that it matters.
So it was a 10-mile race. Yeah, and it was it's a Twin Cities 10 mile. So in Minnesota, where our capital is St. Paul, but we also have a big city called Minneapolis. And so together we call them the Twin Cities. And the race is called the Twin Cities 10 mile. Which I think is probably like 16 kilometers if you're going like with the metric system or the that system there. So in that vein, it's a pretty decent race. It's nothing too crazy, but you definitely get your blood pumping.
I couldn't do
that. But it was a big thing for me. It was a new adventure for me to run that far. So I prepared for it and trained for it and got everything ready to go. And when race day came, I was ready to make it happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 10 miles is a decent effort. Like, I couldn't run that these days. Like, I was from high school, but damn, like, I can't run 10 miles. How long were you training for that for?
So, probably, let's think. I started in the spring at some point, so like April or May, I probably started, and the race was in October. So, maybe like 4 to 6 months, but nothing like too crazy. A couple times a week, running 2-3 miles, slowly building up over time. Yeah. And then I got to the point where I was running like the last run I did before my race was about 8 miles long.
Oh, true. Then you just went straight to a 10 mile. without ever running that.
Exactly.
Is that scary?
Yep. You know, I don't know if it was necessarily scary, but it was just kind of like this interesting feeling of being in an uncomfortable situation, pushing yourself to be like, okay. I don't know if I'm going to make this, make it happen, but either I don't or I start walking or whatever it is, but I got to show up and at least give it my best shot.
Yeah, great. Okay, and then so what happens at the race? What's the next thing?
Yeah, so shortly after mile 8, actually, of my race, so 80% done with the race, I suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, which basically means I collapsed in the middle of the road, slammed my face on the ground, and I was, kind of teetering in between life and death for about 10 to 15 minutes as people gave me CPR.
Wow. I think I remember you saying you don't really remember anything from that moment, right?
Yeah, so I actually don't have any memory after mile 1. So there's a couple reasons as to why, but they said that it could be because I had a concussion when I fell.
Right.
It's likely that I had maybe some short-term memory loss. But after I was rushed to the hospital, I don't want to spoil the story, but I'm alive still. So I was rushed to the hospital, and they put me in the induced coma. And so part of that coma medication could have also given me some short-term memory loss. So the only memory I have is the first mile of the race.
Oh, so they can, I don't sound like I don't know anything, but like they put you in a coma. Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, they were, and I don't necessarily know why, I don't know if they were, trying to stabilize my body, my heart, my mind. I think they're trying to, they cooled me down. They like really actually cooled me down, physically cooled me down, and then put my body kind of in this, coma to just let me kind of stable out. And then they did a bunch of tests and tried to look at what was happening with my heart and my brain, because they didn't know what was happening when I fell. So I was in the ICU right away and under that coma for a number of hours.
Oh, true. And how long do you end up being in hospital for?
So in total, I was there for about 7 days. I was only in the coma for a few hours, but I slowly came back, to consciousness. It took me a few hours to get out of the coma, and then it took me kind of a few days to really kind of get my bearings back. Like I was awake, I was like alive and chatting and stuff, but I wasn't really like myself. It was kind of very emotional and just kind of like understanding what happened, and then I couldn't remember much, even people told me, right away. So it took me a few days to really get my bearings back.
And then do you remember like waking up from your coma and that's when your like memory started again?
I don't have any memory for like 2 or 3 days after I woke up with the coma.
Oh,
yeah,
true.
So it's kind of unique. People like tell me stories and they're like, man, you said this in the hospital.
That's
and I'm
dangerous.
like, I did?
Yeah.
Right.
Ah, true. Okay, well, let's talk about the first. So a cardiac arrest is when blood stops getting to the heart or something? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So there's 2 ways to think about like cardiac arrest and heart attacks. So a heart attack is kind of a plumbing issue. And that's when blood doesn't get to your heart. So you have a blockage of some sort in your heart. Whereas a cardiac arrest is an electrical issue. And so the electrical waves of your heart just act funny for some reason, which does sometimes cause your heart not to get the proper blood flow that it needs. In my case, I had ventricle tachycardia, which the ventricles are the 2 bottom chambers of your heart. And for me, they were kind of misfiring. They were kind of actually quivering in my chest. So it was like 300 beats per minute is what they thought my heart was going, which is like double like my normal activity rate. I'm usually like 160 or 180. Yeah.
That's not
and
safe.
Then that caused me to, they caused me to not have any blood flowing through my body, which caused me to collapse. And then just sit on the pavement there until someone came to help.
True. Well, yeah, let's talk about that. So what happens? You have your cardiac arrest. Obviously, you don't remember it, but I assume you got told what happened. So what happens then?
Yeah, so from what I've been told, there was a group of people around me. So it was, other runners, race volunteer, people that were watching the crowd that saw this happen and then came to my aid, and circled me. They flipped me over. So I landed on my face on the front of my body. They flipped me over, and they just started talking to each other like they were speaking in medical terminology, which kind of tipped each other off to be like, okay, we all know what we're doing here. We all kind of understand, this vein or this type of medical term, and so someone just made the call to say, hey, I think we need to start giving this kid CPR. And so they just started there. And it was kind of like maybe, in the US, we learn how to do CPR in, in middle school or high school.
Right.
And it's kind of exactly what you would learn in that same situation. It's 30 chest compressions, and then someone's giving breaths with, manually with their own breath or with a breathing apparatus. And you just keep rotating when someone gets tired. And so that was what they did for, 10 to 15 minutes before the ambulance could come and shock me back into rhythm.
Is that the best thing? Like for someone who has a cardiac arrest, is that CPR? Is that the best thing to do?
So yeah, so the first thing you should do if anyone ever collapses, you always want to check their pulse and check their breathing. And so just because someone collapses doesn't mean they need CPR.
Right.
You have to really check their pulse. So they checked my pulse and they couldn't find anything, and so that alerted them to start doing CPR on me. And for people with cardiac arrest, it is the best thing to do is early intervention. So if someone is not having a pulse anywhere, the best thing you can do is to give CPR. And then on top of that, if you can't, maybe you're by yourself or you don't know what to do, just give chest compressions, because the breathing it's important, but it's more important to just do chest compressions.
Right.
That's kind of what the American Heart Association suggests for folks.
Yeah.
I was very lucky that I had early intervention for me, that people were there like right away to do something.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, crazy. Second of all, where does God play a part in all this for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my wife and I, we're married now, but at the time her and I were engaged. So she's my fiance, and we'd been going to a really strong Christian church here in Minneapolis and just getting into the Word. And her and I have both been Christians for the majority of our lives. We've obviously not been perfect. We've struggled at different points, but we've been Christians. And so before everything happened, we were, preparing for our wedding, doing premarital counseling and being involved with church. And so we felt like our life was really built on Christ and built on the rock. And when everything happened, we didn't really lean towards frustration or anger towards God, but leaned towards just trusting Him, and leaned into just being like, hey, we don't know why this happened, and we don't know what the next step is, but we just trust you, God, with whatever you have. And so that was kind of the big, I guess I wouldn't call it an aha, but the big feeling in the room was that like, hey, God, we trust you, and like whatever happens.
Yeah.
And we're just going to be thankful for each day that we're here.
Yeah. You had on your running bib, you had Jesus Saves, right?
Yeah.
What
so that
was
kind
the
of
thinking
interesting
behind that? Yeah, what was the thinking behind that?
When you do a race, like, I guess I don't know what it's like for you guys, but people usually put their name on their race bib.
Yeah.
And that it's usually a common thing. Nothing wrong with that, and it's helpful for folks. If you're running the race, I don't know your name, but I see your name is Paul. I can say, hey, Paul, keep it up, man. Like, 2 miles to go, whatever it might be. So it can be used as like an encouraging thing and something that people can use as you're watching. And so I did that for my race bib. I put my name on it initially. And then I was coming home one day from work, and I remember I parked my car outside of our house, a place that we rented with some friends. And I just had this thought like, hey, man, I should change my race bib to something that's a bit more encouraging, a bit more about my faith and about Jesus. Right. And so I just thought, okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. We're called to be, encouragers of other people too, and, to share our faith with other people. And I thought this was a pretty simple way to do it, without being too aggressive or scaring people off or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, sure, let's just make it happen. So I emailed the person, said, hey, I want to change my race bib from my name to Jesus Saves. And that just fit with the, the number of characters that they gave me on the race bib, and got this idea across that, Jesus Saves was for eternity. That was my thought, that like if someone saw that, they would either be reminded of it or they'd ask a question and be like, I don't even know what that means. Like maybe I should look into that more. And hopefully that would just take them on a path to discovery.
Right. Yeah, and it's crazy how you can obviously see that God was in this whole situation, but how simply like sometimes God will just put a thought in our mind or something that we think about, and you can just see how God's played a part in this whole story already of what you've already been speaking about, which I think is super encouraging. That like how good is God, man? And that's like it's crazy
Right.
just to see what He's done in your life. Before we start talking a little bit more about God and stuff, is there anything else in the story that we've missed out, or anything more you want to add, or anything?
Yeah, for sure. So I know one thing that's pretty cool that people often read is that one of the people that came to my aid, his legal name is Jesus, which is spelled
Oh,
like
true.
Jesus. He's like of like Latin or Hispanic descent.
Right.
So we didn't know that, for a while. We actually had communicated with this specific person. His name is Jesse, and we had talked a little bit after everything happened. But then when newspaper got involved and things like that, they did some more research and they kind of blasted that out throughout the world, which was cool. And it was cool that the story went off the way that it did.
Right.
And so that was exciting to be able to share that Jesus saves for eternity. And on that specific day, Jesse or Jesus was there to also save me.
That's so crazy, bro.
Yeah, isn't that just, it's just nuts. So I don't know what,
Yeah.
I mean, it's God working, right? I mean, but
Right.
it's just like crazy to think that's how he chose to work on that day. And so I'm thankful for Jesse and thankful for the other, I oftentimes tell people that there was a dozen or so people there.
Right.
I'm thankful for each one of them for what they did. And I want to encourage folks, if you see something like that happen in your community, to you may not know what to do, but to step up and help out, either call somebody or go help somebody in need, whether it's someone that falls off a bicycle or even something just very basic that happens in your community. But God can use you wherever you are to help, save someone's
Right.
life or make their day a bit better.
Yeah. Have you have you stayed in contact with anyone, or like do you know them? Do you even know who they? Apart from that one guy, do you know who they are and stuff?
A little bit, yeah. So I was able to meet a decent number of them. There was a banquet dinner after the race. That was the race organization has a dinner every year that they put on for the
Right.
volunteers and everything like that. And so they kind of bolted us on to the agenda because of what had happened. It was kind of a big deal locally here, and so I met probably like 8 or 10 of the people, which was incredibly cool. Had dinner with them, got to meet them, and definitely a unique experience in a relationship to be able to meet these people that have saved your life.
Right.
At the same time, you don't have any memory of it. So they kind of like know you, but I don't really know them. But
Yeah.
we
Right.
obviously have a really strong bond, So
Yeah.
I'm connected to a few of them through, or, maybe just one through social media or two. And then actually Jesse and I me and my wife and Jesse and his family are actually pretty close. We get together every
True.
couple months just to, have dinner and hang out and stuff. So it's definitely a unique relationship and something that we're thankful for, throughout this whole situation. We're thankful for those new bonds that we've been given through Christ's plan.
Yeah. Nice. And what's it like? Like, does any part of this, the story, like, still have an impact on you today? Like, we'll talk about the God part of it, but is there anything like ongoing or even health stuff ongoing? Like, where are you at now after all that?
Yeah, so I have a defibrillator in. That's kind of like
True.
the big surgery that I had after. So they put a defibrillator in me, and
Yeah.
I'm still able to run and do things with confidence
Nice.
from a medical perspective. That if something were to happen, that I would be shocked back into rhythm. So that's kind of a big medical change. Nothing really changed, that much for my physical health. I'm fortunate that my brain still works great. My body still works great. The surgery didn't allow me. I can't do any more crunches anymore. That's the one
Oh,
downside of
true.
my defibrillator.
Because of the
So
can you do
because it's
like
placed in my abdomen, so it like goes in my abdomen and then it goes up to the bottom of my heart with two wires and a coil. So that's kind of the one thing. It's a super unique thing. It's crazy. If anyone like works in that industry, amazing medical devices and things like that that help people live really full lives.
right?
But that's kind of the only thing that's changed in terms of my physical body. But spiritually, I think the biggest change is that we just feel so much stronger in our convictions, and we see the power and the hope that Christ gives because we were there. We experienced some really tough stuff, and we've come through it better than we were before, honestly.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask, how has all this sort of shaped or changed potentially your perspective of God, of what you had before this whole situation? Have you noticed anything change or the way you see him or anything?
Yeah, so I think I just realized that he's active and alive in 2022.
Right.
I think sometimes when I read, I'll like personalize it. When I read scripture or I sing songs, like maybe before my cardiac arrest, I've been fortunate to live a pretty privileged life, like
Right.
good family life, good schools, things like that. And the concept of God was real, but it never really felt like I was, you read about David and, Daniel in the
Right.
lion's den and things like that, where they need God to move in order for something to happen. And that was our first, for me, one of the first times I really felt like I need God to move right now. Like if God doesn't work here, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's been really the biggest change for me, is to just remember that, hey, God is here and he brings hope and healing and restoration and in ways that I've never experienced, in anything else besides what Christ can do. So that's been the biggest change for me.
Yeah. I wonder, because I think it's so often that we as Christians can doubt God. And even though we've seen what he's done in our lives, we've read about it, we've experienced it, like we know it's real, but we can still, like, we go through seasons of doubt and we're like, where is God in the season? And I wonder, even after experiencing something that God has obviously done in your life and everyone can tell that God was a part of that, do you still go through a season where you might doubt God, or you might think he can't do something, like you're believing for something, like, oh, I don't know if God can do that? Like, do you still have seasons like that?
I haven't had a season of doubt like that since my cardiac arrest, to be honest.
Right.
Not to say I'm perfect at my faith at all.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't. I know we really hold on to what we've seen there and just remind ourselves of that a lot. I think when we see other tough stuff happening, or we have stuff that we go through with different people in our lives, we oftentimes think about that. And so I know I've been told that as well.
Right.
Or people, that we communicated with are like, whenever you feel like God moves in your life, keep a journal, write something down. And then whenever you do have seasons of doubt, go back to that journal and just read about the time that God showed up here and showed up there. And it's a little bit different than reading it in scripture. We know scripture is inspired by the Holy Spirit and it's true. But when you personalize it to say, hey, I remember when God showed up in X, Y, and Z, that can be super powerful.
Right.
So we oftentimes, I think, lean on our past to help us in our present.
Yeah, and what's crazy is, like, I don't know why God, like, why this has happened to you, but, like, at the same time, you can see, like, you must bring some, like, people must get filled with faith when they talk to you and they hear your story. And if they're doubting, they could be like, damn, but, like, remember when that happened to Tyler, when God did that in his life? And so everyone close to you must feel like it must be such, I don't say a blessing, but, like, they must get, like, encouraged out of what God's done in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's been kind of the impetus for me, being on this show or being on different podcasts and doing some public speaking. So we're doing some more public speaking since kind of COVID's kind of faded away a little bit here in the States. And so that's been a big thing, because when we talk to people, I can tell you 50 stories about my life, and this is probably the only one that gets everybody to lean in the room and say, like, wait, what'd you say? That's kind of my one party trick is this story. And I think to be able to use it for Christ is so fulfilling in a way that, I can't even explain. So it's great to feel that, and then to be able to go and share it with other people.
Yeah, nice. I was going to ask what's next for you, but is it mainly just continuing to share your story, getting it out there, and, like, because what you're doing is so encouraging. Like, you're not here to push anything to sell or anything. You're here just to share your faith and share your story and encourage people, which I think is amazing. And first of all, like, I want to honor you for that. Like, that's incredible. Shout out to you. You're amazing. But is that, like, what's next for you?
Yeah, so my wife and I, we both work like normal, 9-to-5 jobs. So we have our own careers, and we're cool with that. But recently God just really put it on my heart to start kind of I don't know if an official ministry, whatever you would call that. So it's called Moon Family Ministries, and basically the driver behind it is to be able to encourage people, to show people that life with Christ is the best life you can have. And we really just want to use what God's given us, our talents and our gifts, to do that. So for me, it's this story and being on podcasts and sharing the story, encouraging people, going to schools and speaking, or churches and speaking to folks about it. And then as well, just using other things in our lives. So last year we made a running club because we were interested in running and we wanted to encourage people with the word and with fitness. So we did that for a summer. And now we have a dog. That's kind of our next thing too. We have a puppy. So we want to be able to eventually make her, or see if she's able to be a therapy dog. So we can bring her to hospitals and be with people there and just try to see what God has planned for that. So we're really just trying to empty ourselves for Christ and just say, hey, what do you want us to do? Let's go do it.
Yeah, and that's epic, man. Because honestly, like, that's not easy. Like, I'm sure it'd be so much easier for you just to like work full time, just spend time with your wife, just hang out, just chill out. But like, what you're doing is honestly so encouraging, and I believe so many people are going to be encouraged by what you're doing to even start their own things. You know what I mean? Like, what you're doing is having a big impact, bigger than just yourself or myself or whatever. I believe it's going to change people's lives. So first of all, thank you for doing that. Before we start wrapping up though, we'll go into rapid fire.
Can I jump in quick, Paul,
bro,
actually?
Jump in.
Jump in and say something quick?
Yeah.
Thank you for the kind words too. But I will, I think oftentimes I'll speak about the Christian church in America is that we just get so comfortable. We just feel like things are great and, I can work my 9-to-5 job and I can retire in, 40 years, whatever it is, and get a nice house on a lake and just live my life and die. And things are just great. I think that sometimes we think that, and I've thought that in my own life.
Yeah.
And then I just remember what God calls us to do. And like, if I'm going to be about Christ, then I'm going to be all in on it. And so I might not make as much money as I want to, or I might not live this certain life or retire when I want to, but I'm living for Christ every day and doing whether it's this ministry or something else down the line. So, I didn't want to cut you off there, but I feel like that's something that we can do, especially as young adults. I feel like in the younger generation to be like, if we want to raise our families or do different things like that, or show the world that like we're not just here to retire and die and be okay, but we're here to live a really full life for Christ.
I was just, because before this interview I was interviewing someone about leadership and we were talking about taking action, and I remember mentioning that it's so easy for us to just like coast through life just chilling. We'll go to church on a Sunday and we'll do all that sort of stuff, but actually going out and making an impact is so important. And we can just live our life, do all that, but being able to go out and actually change people's lives is something, it's probably not the norm, to be honest. So I was actually going with this. I started to lose it, but where I was actually going with this is, for me, as a youngish adult, like I'm 21, I'm all about like, I want to be able to like buy a house and be in a good relationship and work hard and earn money and blah, 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 blah. But there's so many people who are like my age who have, I'm not rich, but like I've been working full time, so I have some savings, but like there's people who haven't been working, they don't have any savings, but dang, they are so happy, they just love life, and there's so much more to life than just working and saving up money, buying a nice house. But if we can actually use that time to like make an impact on stuff, like it's so powerful. And I think it's totally what you were saying about all that. Like, sure, you could just, work hard and you work at that and, have a nice house and retire and blah, blah, blah. But like spending time, like advancing God's kingdom and spending time with God is stuff that doesn't always lead to like physical change. But like, there's so many happy people who don't have much, but just love God and all that. So I thank you for jumping in. That's great. That's amazing. Yeah. And I agree 100%. So yeah. Is there anything else in your story you want to get to? Do we miss anything before we do some rapid fire questions?
No, I think that's pretty much it. And I just appreciate having me on. I'm ready for the rapid fire session. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great story. Keep sharing it. It's amazing. I say rapid fire, but sometimes we end up spending like 5 minutes on each question. But there's only 3. We'll do it quick. First of all, what's your favorite book? Great question. I know you sent, full disclosure, he sent these to me, earlier, and I was thinking about them. So I just read a book called Extreme Ownership by a Navy SEAL, and that one was really good. It's not a Christian book, so I'm not all in on it, but the idea basically is just to take ownership of everything that you do. And I thought the power of that, especially in my life, to not push blame, but to just take ownership of the mistakes that are made, underneath my leadership or, in my own life has been pretty transformational. So Extreme Ownership, that's the top one right now for sure.
That's great. Do you know who it's by? Did you say?
It's Jocko Willink.
Oh, yep. Yeah, no. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite podcast? Do you listen to many podcasts?
I don't actually listen to too many, I've tried, I feel like I got into different things at different times.
It's not your vibe.
I do love listening to sermons and stuff like that.
Nice.
That's kind of been exciting for me to do. But actually a podcast that I've listened to, they've only had 2 episodes out, but our local church here in the Minneapolis area just released their own podcast, and they're interviewing people from our church. And so that's been super cool to hear people's stories, more than we would have in the past, just, meeting them, seeing them at church and getting coffee or whatever it is. So I'm excited for this podcast that they have going on right now.
Yeah. What's it called? Do you know?
It's Cedar Valley Church. So, and it's just, that's our church name. I think it's called Lean Into the Messy. That's the podcast.
Nice. Sounds cool. Okay, this is the interesting one. If you could have one mentor, dead or alive, anyone you want, except for God, obviously. If you could have one mentor, dead or alive, who would that be?
Yeah, I know. God is usually like people ask that at work or whatever, and I'm always like, I don't typically say God, but that's like always the one that it's like, Jesus, that'd be great, right? Yeah. I feel like there are some pretty amazing like pastors or missionaries. I'm reading right now a book called Spiritual Leadership by J. Oswald Sanders. And it's a really kind of old book, like in the 1940s or 50s, like they wrote it, but they've revamped it a few times to make it more easy to read for like 2022,
Right.
But the principles are super solid. And he always references different missionaries because he was a missionary, Hudson Taylor and things like that were just powerful missionaries. So I think just to be able to sit and, have coffee or whatever it is with someone like that, and just to learn what their life was like to be all in that missionary perspective would be pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's crazy. I haven't actually heard of him before, but that's cool. I'll write that down. Yeah, well, honestly, Tyler, man, thank you so much for jumping on. Honestly, I've already said it, but like I honor just the way you're living your life, the way you encourage people. Like what you're doing is actually amazing, and so keep doing it. I appreciate you jumping on so much. But if people want to learn more about you, about Moon Family Ministries, where can they learn more about that?
Yeah, so we have a general email, so moonfamilyministries@gmail.com. So, just one word. But also our Instagram, so Moon Family Ministries, just that's the handle. It's a photo of me, my wife, and our dog. That's kind of the profile picture for now. But we're just getting started, and we're not trying to sell anything or do anything crazy. Just trying to encourage people. So give us a follow if that's something that interests you, and we'd love just to engage with you wherever you're at.
Yeah, that's great, and like it's amazing how you actually are just here, like not to promote something, but you're not selling anything. You're not here for like you don't really have an agenda. You're just here to share your story and share God, which is incredible. So again, thank you so much for jumping on, man. Really appreciate it, and can't wait to see what God does in your life.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for checking out this week's episode of the Son of Man podcast. I hope it brought you as much value as it did to me. And if you did enjoy it, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. It really helped more ambitious Christians just like yourself all around the world get some of this knowledge that we discussed today. Also, if you'd like to dive deeper into any of the topics we discussed today, I've actually got a free private Facebook group that is filled with people just like yourself, people who are trying to achieve their God dreams, that you can head over. The link will be in the show notes or in the description below, and go check that out. Anyway, guys, hope you have a great day. I'll be back here next time, same place, next week, and I'll see you guys there. Peace out.